Thanks for joining me. This is Unit 1, Lesson 1, Screencast number 2. And we're picking up on page 10. What is involved in scientific work? So I'm at the top with the blue heading. Even though science and the people who study it are very diverse, scientists have several characteristics in common. Scientists are curious, creative, and careful observers. They are also logical, skeptical, and objective. You do not have to be a scientist to have these characteristics. When you use these habits of mind, though, you are thinking like a scientist. All right, so let's talk about what those things are, what those characteristics are. Okay, so I'm down at the bottom with the red headings. The first one is careful observation. Scientists observe with their senses as well as with scientific tools. All observations contribute to the understanding of a subject. Okay? They give an example, and this is actually the person in the picture. Rachel Carson was an ecologist who spent her entire life observing the world around her, the natural world. She studied oceans and wrote books and articles about them, and she spent years researching and documenting the effects of pesticides like DDT on the environment. And then she published a book outlining all of the effects, and that book was called Silent Spring, and it drew a lot of attention to the problem of what pesticides were doing to the environment. Okay, but she sat and observed and wrote down her observations and collected information for a long period of time. Okay, the second characteristic of a good scientist is that they are curious. So curiosity. Scientists are curious about the world around them and about the things that they observe. Most scientific discoveries are the result of someone asking why or how something happens. For example, Rachel Carson was curious about all of nature. This curiosity drove her to identify the connections in it, and it allowed her to understand how one part affects another. Okay. The next characteristic of a good scientist is creativity. Being creative means to be original. Creative people think for themselves and always try to see other ways things might be. In science, creativity is used when scientists design experiments and other investigations to test their hypotheses. Okay, next one is logic. Thinking logically involves reasoning through information and making conclusions supported by evidence. Logical thinking is an important tool for the scientist. Okay? For example, toothpaste helps to prevent tooth decay. Some mouthwash also helps to prevent tooth decay. It is logical to think that if the two products are used together, they might work even better. This logical conclusion should then be tested. Okay. The next one is a word you might not be as familiar with. This is skepticism, or being skeptical. Being skeptical means that you don't accept everything you hear or read immediately. Just because you read it or heard it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. You ask questions before deciding whether you will accept information as factual. Scientists are skeptical of drawing conclusions too quickly. Instead, they repeat observations and experiments, and they review and try to replicate the work of others. Replicate, by the way, means repeat or reproduce. Objectivity is the next characteristic of a good scientist. Being objective requires that you set aside your personal feelings, your moods, and beliefs while you evaluate something. Science requires unbiased observations, experiments, and evaluations. Scientists want their tests to support their ideas. Scientists must be careful not to let this hope influence what they see. Okay. There's another good word actually in that explanation, and that is unbiased, and the opposite obviously is biased. Okay. And being biased sort of means that you have like preconceived notions about things, that you've kind of already made up your mind a little bit, and it affects the way you see things and filter information. All right. So after you've had a chance to go back and reread and highlight and maybe take some of the main points, these are some of the things that I highlighted and made a special note of. So you might want to do that also.